Muhammad's following began to grow. They called themselves Muslims, for those who surrender to God. They set out to preserve the message Muhammad had brought. This was the beginning of the Quran.
The Quran was revealed orally, but very soon people realized that it had to be written down in order to make sure that it wasn't corrupted and that the original message was maintained. And from a very early date, and it's very unclear when that date was, because no early manuscripts of the Quran survive, people began copying it down.
The Quran is a revelation of spiritual teaching, of both ethical and social guidance. It was revealed and remains in Arabic.
What's so extraordinary about the Quran is its naturalness, so that it can say the most powerful cosmic things with a sense of intimacy, so that power and tenderness come together constantly in the Quranic language.
With words alone, the Quran delivers its vision to the faithful. Its imagery conjures a picture of the afterlife that resonates with all the power of traditional Bedouin poetry.
Imagine yourself in the desert, surrounded by dust, by the glare of the sun. You wear cloaks to cover your body because the wind will just sear your skin right off your face. And you walk into an oasis. The temperature drops dramatically. There's a quiet there. The wind is no longer howling. Everywhere you look, you see green and color. The world of water and paradise are symbolically tied to one another. And the Quran could conjure that up with just a few briefly chosen words.
Yet for all the imagery of paradise in the Quran, there was no easy description of God. The mystery would remain.
It's very difficult to talk about God without reifying God. Reifying to make God into a thing, or anthropomorphizing God, to make God into a projection of our own human self. And that's why Muslims don't like sculpture, for example, traditionally, because they believe that there's that danger. And the Quran avoids that by constantly shifting the pronouns, so we can't really reify God and get an image, a physical image of God.
Rather than a physical image of God or of Muhammad, it is the beauty of the Quran itself that is celebrated in Islam.
Islam developed in this context where pictures were not favored. The Quran, as it was revealed, was God's representation on earth, and Muslims felt from a very early time that the only just representation of God's word, was the Quran itself, not any picture of God, certainly not, because you couldn't represent God, and certainly not a picture of Muhammad, because he wasn't divine.
Muhammad's army was returning home, now 10,000 strong. The vanquished knew the terrible fate that awaited them.
According to the modes of tribal warfare, the Meccans could expect a big revenge. The men are usually killed, women and children are sold into slavery. There's little pity for the loser in a tribal war. Of course, that's standard around the world.
But Muhammad had a surprise in store for the fallen city.
When Muhammad came into Mecca, and not only did not carry out a bloody revenge, but actually embraced the very Meccans who had fought him for 3 years and attempted to annihilate him. It was very shocking to the people in his milieu. So within the very founding of a religion, one finds episodes of great generosity, often extraordinary acts of kindness and mercy.
But not all of Mecca escaped Muhammad's wrath. Flush with victory, his troops marched straight to the Kaaba. 7 times they circled the shrine, as those who had come to seek its protection appealed to their idols. But it was not the pagan people Muhammad had come to destroy. It was their gods. He raised his staff, and the tribal gods of his ancestors smashed into dust.
When Muhammad entered Mecca and entered the shrine and destroyed the idols in the shrine, this is of great cultural and symbolic importance in Islam. By breaking the idols, he was breaking apart the tribal system in which each tribe really had its own independent deity. This was shocking to the Bedouin. This was saying the gods of our fathers are being destroyed. In some sense, you're saying that our fathers themselves were deluded. How can you say this in a tradition in which relationships to one's father and tribe were primary? So this act of iconoclasm then is seen as an act of prophetic violence that has just as much importance in Islamic tradition as Moses' breaking of the tablets when he saw the idolatry at Mount Sinai, or Jesus' casting the money sellers out of the temple.
The destruction of the idols was a new beginning, a breaking from the past and the creation of a powerful new force. Mecca was just the beginning. One after another, the tribes of a nation were summoned to the fold and united under the banner of Islam. A worldwide community of faith was begun. The Muslims turned to the north, swept into present-day Lebanon and Syria. They continued west into Egypt and quickly across North Africa, fortifying the coastline of the Mediterranean. Only the seas stopped them.
Its growth was so explosive from 622, the year 1 of the Islamic calendar. Within 50 years, people whose father had been camel herders were now governing one of the major empires in world history. Within 200 years, it extended from Spain to China.
The Muslims absorbed the Sasanian Empire of Iran and 2/3 of the Christian Byzantine Empire. By now, the empire was larger than Rome. It stretched from Morocco in the west to the Indus River in the east, where the border of India is today. How had it happened that so small an army could conquer an area so large, so fast, so easily?
Islam's success in expanding into the central Middle East and across North Africa was due in large part because people were fed up with previous regimes. So the idea that Muslims were going across the world saying convert or die is really not accurate, not at all. That it didn't have a heavy hand. They didn't
rule with a heavy hand. They allowed the conquered peoples to maintain their administrative structures. They allowed the Christians and the Jews to maintain their religious law and to be governed by them. And so, in many cases, conquered peoples did not feel the presence of the new regime very heavily.
It's the times that creates the movement, and sometimes the men. The Roman Empire had collapsed, the Byzantine Empire wasn't strong enough. There was a need for a new vision, a new way of looking into life. And I think what happened at that time, Mohammed's mission, filled the void that the societies wanted. They really wanted some sort of solidarity in their lives.
The lessons of the Quran, so successful for the Muslims in Medina and Mecca, were playing out on a global scale. As the conquest swept through Syria, the Muslims held their Friday prayers in the Church of St. John the Baptist in Damascus, allowing its Christian congregation to continue their services on Sunday. Side by side, the two faiths shared the same building, in peace. As the Muslim community grew, they bought the old church from the Christian congregation and built a huge mosque on the site. With Byzantine artisans, they decorated it with golden mosaics of an Islamic paradise. The Great Mosque of Damascus would become a model for new mosques to come, all across the empire. The Arabs transformed their conquered lands, maintaining, improving, or expanding the infrastructure. In Tunisia, building on Roman ruins, they devised an ingenious system of water purification, using gravity to separate fresh water from sediments.
All over you find schemes for bringing water from the mountains where there was more water to the plains where there might be less water.
They resurrected elaborate irrigation systems, filling the old stone aqueducts with precious water. Agriculture flourished as life-giving staples like wheat were introduced to the Mediterranean region. But Muslims saved their most monumental feat for the holy city of Jerusalem.
Islam's first great work of art is the Dome of the Rock. It was built in a city that was holy to Christians and Jews, and it's spectacular.
Like Mecca and the Kaaba, the significance of this holy site goes back to Abraham, for the rock within is said to be the place he nearly sacrificed his son. It was built to rival the nearby Church of the Holy Sepulchre, where Jesus was said to have been buried.
What's extraordinary about the Dome of the Rock is how perfect it is. People revered this site as some place that was holy to Abraham and to Isaac. Imagine, if you will, these new guys coming in and taking over this piece of prime real estate and building a new building for a new religion that sits on top of a mountain and sparkles and glitters in the sunlight for everyone to see. This is not something that a fly-by-night. This is something big and important. Islam has come to stay.
In just 100 years, Mohammed's vision had transformed the spiritual and political map of the world, and his followers had established an empire larger than Rome. But Mohammed never lived to see it. In the 11th year of the Islamic calendar, 632 AD, only 2 years after the taking of Mecca, Mohammed died. Medina fell into despair. For days, the city was consumed with sorrow and ceremony.
He's known to have said that he wanted to be buried very simply, with no marker over his grave. He didn't want people to worship his grave. That would interfere with their worship of God.
God had spoken to them only through Muhammad. Now that the Prophet had left them, perhaps God would as well.
Muhammad's death set up a crisis in the young Islamic community. The question of succession was the first thing that really occupied people's concerns. At this point, there was a divergence of opinion as to how the community should go about choosing a new leader. According to the Shiites, the faction, the Shia of Ali, Muhammad had indeed designated Ali, his son-in-law and cousin, as his successor. The opinion that came to be the majority opinion, or the Sunni opinion, held that Muhammad had not appointed a successor during his life, but had said, after I'm gone, choose one from among your peers, from among the elders. And from the house there came out the man who would be his successor, Abu Bakr. And he addressed the people and said, if you worship Muhammad, know that he is dead. If you worship God, know that he lives forever.
Here was the secret to Islam's strength and profound influence. The unifying power of one God, merciful and compassionate, the power of one people, bound by a common faith. Muhammad did not lead the conquest or create the empire to come. The transforming power of his message did. Out of that message would spring a font of knowledge that would transform humanity, as Islam continued to spread its reach far and wide. Awaiting the Muslims would be a new age. They would be destined for enlightenment, for new horizons, and a clash of great powers, the like of which the world had never seen.